I will start this video with a quote from Davidson himself, from the horse's mouth, so to speak, as he quotes himself in his paper Epistemology Externalized from 1990 or 1991. So he says, what stands in the way of global skepticism of the senses is, in my view, the fact that we must, in the plainest and methodologically most basic cases, take the objects of a belief to be the causes of that belief. A lot rests on how we interpret the must in the above statement, whether as the psychological compulsion to assume that, or as an epistemic impossibility or the rationality of assuming otherwise, because of a compelling or indubitable reason for that belief. On this depends whether what Davidson is offering is an argument or a polemical case against skepticism, or merely an empirical account of what we cannot help but believe, of the kind that we find in Hume, for instance. In any case, part of Davidson's way out of the skeptical well is to postulate the quite commonsensical thesis that intersubjectively different persons are caused or prompted by the same external stimuli, such that a person who is interpreting another's utterances, evaluating their truth value, and ascribing propositional attitudes to that other person is caused or prompted by the same worldly causes to even question or consider another's attitudes and thus pass judgment on their soundness or epistemic standing. This presupposes an aspect of what an even more radical skepticism than the skepticism about the external world, that is, solipsism, puts into doubt the existence of other minds, and uses this presupposition to get out of external world skepticism. It may be seen as begging the question against the most radical skeptic of all, the solipsistic idealist. But to be fair to Davidson, in this very spot at least, he is not addressing skepticism about other minds or trying to answer it, but he is talking about external world skepticism. An even more thorough response to skepticism in general would need to address that other facet of skepticism as well, though. Has Davidson done so? The above argument from Davidson relates closely to his ideas about radical interpretation, as communication and mutual understanding between different speakers implicitly presupposes the commitment to the existence of the external world and other minds, if not the actual existence of those things. Davidson's view is that knowledge is threefold, or that there are three main forms of it: subjective knowledge of one's own mind, intersubjective knowledge of other minds, and objective knowledge of the external objective world. Knowledge as such is possible only in the relation that Davidson called triangulation between those three elements, and thus at least indirectly supports our beliefs about the latter two. This framework of Davidson's, however, seems as not much more than an assumption. Davidson doesn't in turn back up, but still bases his case against skepticism on it. And consequently, that case against skepticism goes through or falls together with that assumption. In the abstract, for knowledge of other minds in Davidson's philosophy, Anita Avramidis wrote, Davidson aims to explain how it is that we come by knowledge of the world, our own minds and other minds, and to show that knowledge of other minds is the more fundamental. A community of minds is the basis of all knowledge and provides the measure of all things. So it seems that Davidson cannot further his case for the existence of the external world without his more basic theory of intersubjective agreement or charity in interpretation, which relates to my point from the beginning of the video. The principle of charity, by the way, has for Davidson two large dimensions that Bader Stroud called respectively the weak and the strong one, namely that our interpretation of the sayings of others must assume their general truth, since there can be no successful communication or mutual understanding without the assumption that most of our beliefs are shared, and the strong one that our beliefs about the external world must in large be true, since even the possibility of error presupposes a great many true beliefs in the background. On the assumption of charity, skepticism is indeed not a viable position, but I'm afraid that Davidson's case remains on the level at the level of a statement and not an actual argument against penetrating skeptical attacks. Ernest Sosa, in his article entitled simply Davidson's Epistemology, speaks about Davidson's relation to skepticism in some detail. Among other things, he discusses the issue of whether Davidson's argument is a priori. As Nagel says, an argument against a skeptic would have to be. And cites Davidson is saying that at least his argument is not fully a priori, since it has a significant empirical premise. In main, the one that the way people are, it assumes the way people are and the beliefs they have about the external world, which is an empirical element of the premise. In any case, he dubs Davidson's position as Davidson's new reason avoiding approach, on which justification derives somehow from a source other than the subject's actual reasoning. The source is supposed to be the external world, which causes us to have the beliefs that we have, and thus implicitly justifies us in holding those beliefs. So the source is exactly what the skeptic is worrying about, and by excluding that, we exclude the main basis of the assumed veridicality of most of our beliefs about the external world, at least as metaphysical realism conceives of it. Note here that idealism might still keep some form of knowledge and truth and justification, even while not accepting the existence of the external world, at least not a physical one. Sosa further cites Davidson as saying, "I have been happy to go along with Rorty in telling the skeptic to get lost." So he says that in addition to some kind of case or some kind of argument maybe that he's putting forward, he has been happy to go along with Rorty in telling the skeptic to get lost. Most skeptics presumably wouldn't be quote unquote happy, as Davidson says, with this dismissive and neglectful attitude of Davidson's, since they are seeking an actual theoretical response or refutation or disproof of their view. Davidson, frustrating that expectation, says the following: "Reflecting on the nature of thought and interpretation led me to a position which, if correct, entails that we have a basically sound view of the world around us. If so, there is no point in attempting in addition to show the skeptic wrong." To be fair, this in particular is more of an autobiographical note by Davidson describing his intellectual life journey, and does not offer an argument in there, or included in there. By that position he was led to by reflection cannot simply be his personal philosophical inclination or idiosyncrasy, if it is to hold weight for other thinkers as well, but must be argued for and defended. If I am right here, Davidson doesn't really do that, but assumes or freely postulates certain propositions which, if true, would disprove skepticism. The problem is, to prove something to the satisfaction of one's opponent, one needs to start from premises that the opponent does not or cannot deny, and Davidson starts out from the very premises the skeptic puts in question in the first place. So if that is true, Davidson simply begs the question against the skeptic and doesn't give him what he is asking for. So I conclude Davidson's response to the skeptic in that case and on that interpretation cannot be satisfactory. Basically, Davidson's argument against the external world skeptic, if it qualifies as an argument at all, is that the bulk of our particular beliefs about the external world, as well as our belief that the external world is there in the first place, cannot be false, since they are caused by that very world and the states of affairs within it. But that obviously is circular, since that very external world is what the skeptic is doubting the existence of. It seems that Davidson is simply postulating a common sense metaphysic and epistemology against the view that tries to question it, that is skepticism, or at least tries to seek a good enough reason for its acceptance. So that has been it for this video. Thank you for watching the video. So do you think my interpretation and critique of Davidson have been fair to him and did justice to him? Would you endorse Davidson's reply to the skeptic? Or do you think you may have a better one? Or are you perhaps yourself more on the side of skepticism and think that no fully satisfactory answer has yet been given? Write to me in the comments and be sure to like and subscribe for more content like this. Also consider supporting me via PayPal through the link I will post in the description. That is it for now, and until next time, goodbye.